We will continue working with the Silverlight applications that we created in the previous video, and we will make it a more compelling user interface. So effectively what we are going to do is build a video wall that renders these image files and these two new WMV files that I've added to the library directly onto the SharePoint page. And in fact we will play the video simultaneously, so we will have an engaging, rich media experience for the user. So the first thing I will do is remove my code that renders hyperlinks. The previous demo literally just had a link to each file, and instead we want to build up a media wall. So we will create a stack panel, which is a Silverlight object, and we will call it row. And we will build up a multi-column, multi-row media wall full of videos and images. We will create this row, this stack panel object, and we will use that to build the wall. Now the first thing we will do in our code is modify the relative URL of each image file so that it's a fully qualified URL. And this will make it easier for us to render the images and the videos. So we are literally prepending the URL of the client context object onto the previously extracted server relative URL for each file. Now we can start making some decisions about the layout of our media wall. And effectively I want 3 files per row. So I can use a very simple mod operator such that if row tracker mod 3 is equal to 0, we know we need to start a new row, and we'll create a new stack panel to do so. We have this row tracker variable I just declared as an integer, so we will use that to keep track of how many videos and images we are rendering. So we create a new stack panel with its orientation to horizontal, and we will add the stack panel to the existing stack panel, which is called myContainer. Once we have determined whether we need a new row or not, we can start working with the individual files in the document library. So the first thing we will do is something really simple, which is to check for image files. We will see if the file name ends in PNG or JPG, and we know that we can render those file types in Silverlight very easily. We will just use those two as an example, but of course you could create additional media file types or image file types that you want to render in Silverlight here, so JPEG would be something sensible to do. We will just stick with these two for the time being. We also wanted to determine whether the file ends in WMV, so whether they are Windows Media Video, because if they are we will treat those differently. We will still add them to the wall, but we will add them in a media element and get them playing automatically, so the visual effect will be rather nice. Now let's deal with the images. So if it's a PNG or JPG, we will create a new image control, and this is a Silverlight control. We will set its maximum width to something that is suitable for the area we have in our Silverlight application. So we will say 100, and that's in pixels. We will then define how the images get displayed in the image control. So we will stretch them in a uniform manner, which means that we won't distort the image. We will take up the available space by stretching or indeed compressing the image so that it fits nicely into our 100 pixel width image placeholder. We then need to build a bitmap image because an image control is not capable of natively displaying an image. It displays a bitmap instead. So we need to build the bitmap first of all. And we can do this very easily by passing the URI of the image into the bitmaps constructor. And we use URI kind.absolute here because we turn the relative URL for each file into an absolute URL in our first line of code. So now we have our bitmap image and we can set the source property of the image control to this bitmap. Now before we can use bitmaps we must have a using statement of system.windows.media.imaging. So I've just pointed that out there. What we can now do is create a hyperlink button and add the image as the content of the hyperlink button. So this is more than just an image, it's something the user can click and open up the file in an external window, for example. So that's exactly what we'll do, and we'll create our media button as a hyperlink button. We will set its margins so we don't crowd the space in our Silverlight application with images that are too close together. We will put a border effectively of 5 pixels between each of these images that we render, and then we set the content of the hyperlink button to our image. And that's all we need to do to render an image in a button in Silverlight. We set the target name to blank so that when the user clicks an image it opens up in a new window, and that's the same as you would do with standard HTML hyperlinks. And then we will set the navigate URI to the absolute URL of this image. So we can do that very straightforwardly with a new URI and passing the FURL to the constructor. And we will say it's an absolute kind of URL, which of course it is. We can then add the hyperlink to the stack panel row, and the hyperlink contains the image and the image contains the bitmap. And the hyperlink has this navigate URI property as well. Now we increment the value of the row tracker because When we get to the fourth row, then we know we'll need to create a new row. And that's the whole point of that integer variable. Now we will do something very similar for the videos, but this time we won't render them in an image. We will render them in the media element. The media element is capable of playing a video directly on the page, so we will see how to do that. We have a similar type of attribute called stretch, and again we don't want to distort the video as it plays on the page, so we will say that its stretch is uniform, and of course by stretch we might really mean compress, as we will have a relatively small area for the video. We will set its width to 100 so it fits in nicely with the images, and then quite straightforwardly we can just set the source property of the media element to the WMV file's URL. So we can do that just as we did with the bitmap constructor. We can do that directly to the media source of the media element. And here's a nice feature. We will just set autoplay to true, so all of these videos that get rendered will start playing as soon as the user visits the page. They will have a wall of videos all potentially playing at the same time. Of course you don't need to do that, but that's just to show you for this example. Now just as we did with the image, we will create a hyperlink button because a user may want to click the video and have it displayed in an external window, perhaps in Windows Media Player for example. Now Silverlight will allow us to do things like switch to full screen and so forth, but we won't delve into that in this particular demo. For us it's good enough to open it in a new window. So again we set a margin and content. So a hyperlink button is very flexible. Its content can be the media element, so that's pretty nice. We will set its target name to blank again, so we'll say that this will open in a new window. And we set the navigator URI just as we did for the images. This time we'll set them to the appropriate URI for this video. And again it's a fully qualified absolute URI, so we will specify that. Just as before with the images then, we need to add the hyperlink button to the row. But here's a nice touch. We can add a cursor of type hand to the media button, and we can add the media button to the stack panel. And just as before, we will need to increment the row tracker variable because we will be rendering these videos side by side with the images. So we need to keep track of when we need a new row. And that's really all there is to it. So a few lines of code and we can build a more engaging user interface for the end user. So let's build the Silverlight application, and that's being built to the client bin folder. And now we can go and browse to our page. So we go to Site Pages and our Silverlight web part page, and there you can see we have loaded the images, but we've also loaded the videos and they are auto playing. They're only very short, so they will stop in a few seconds time, but we can click our videos and effectively open them in a new window. So along with the progress bar that updates in real time as we load these files, we have also built a more engaging user interface by building this media wall.